Welcome to Taiwan Talks. I'm Albert Cho. There is a consensus among Northeast Asian countries to peacefully solve North Korea's nuclear issue. But diplomatic friction between regional powers such as Japan and South Korea complicates the stability of this region. Joining us today are Yuan I, National Zhengzhi University Institute of International Relations Adjunct Research Fellow, and Wen-Pin Su, National Zhengzhi University Department of Political Science Professor. A very warm welcome to both on the show. According to Japan's CNN media, after a break of 4.5 years, China State Council Premier Qiang, Japanese Prime Minister Kishida Fumio, and South Korean President Yoon may attend the China-Japan-Korea Summit scheduled by the end of May. My first question is for Professor Yuan. How do you view the relationships between China, Japan, and South Korea, especially considering Japan and South Korea's friendly relationship with the U.S.? Is it a possibility there, especially for Japan, to remain neutral between China and the U.S. in the future?
First, I think we should realize why makes this a sudden decision, to convene this trilateral. It's been died down for almost 5 years. Mm-hmm. So timing-wise, I think that intrigues us first. Why China all of a sudden wishes to reinstate this trilateral summit in the first place. And second, the presence of Qiang, to me, a little bit surprised. Everybody realized that his status has been downgraded. So the presence of Qiang, simplify a lower level of Chinese officiality attending this. Okay, I wish that Wang Yi would attend instead. So the overall situation, one has to take into account the means or ends. That is, what are the nature of this gathering? Is a means or is ends? In that case, that we could easily to figure out what kind of a role does each one of the player would play. Like, as you correctly say, what kind of a neutral, is it a neutral role to be played by Japan? Mm-hmm. I got a reservation for that role, all right, mm-hmm. to be played, because the situation has transformed the second layer of player, including South Korea and Japan, down the road, very much to lesser degree of importance as one could imagine. Mm-hmm.
Professor Su, so what's your observation of this ongoing summit between the three countries, and especially when a little bit kind of soften relations between U.S. and China? Would that have an impact on this ongoing summit?
Yeah. So we know that the U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken had just finished his trip to China last month, and then coincidentally, China, Japan, and South Korea is planning a summit for at the end of this month, and another trilateral summit will be held between the U.S., Japan, and South Korea in July. So the timing of this series of summits makes sense, well, at least for me. And so I don't think that the trilateral summit between China, South Korea, and Japan will signal that Japan and South Korea's friendly relationships with the United States is becoming sour. And actually, I think that in the upcoming summit of these three countries, they will definitely discuss the implications of Blinken's trip to China and for the geographical situation in East Asia. And I also agree with Professor Yuan that for Japan, and well, the country, I think it's trying to be neutral, but it's pretty difficult for this country to do so.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we see that Australia, the US, and the UK have formed the AUKUS three-way security partnership aimed at countering China's military expansion in the Indo-Pacific region. Currently, Japan and South Korea have both expressed intentions to join AUKUS. Professor Yuan, so will Beijing worry about Japan and Korea because of this, or will Beijing exert pressure on them? After all, the Japan-China-Korea Summit is around the corner, Beijing would probably seek some favor or compromise from Japan or South Korea.
I suspect at this moment, during the process of the power competition, all the efforts are driven by the various actors. I think it has to be regarded as the process, as a means, not necessarily as ends. Therefore, we have to deal with one at a time, and to pinpoint the process at one particular juncture, where we will be able to discern what constitute the difficulties and so on and so forth. So it's a mixture of everything. Let's see what will happen.
Okay, Professor Su, what's your observation with this?
Yeah, well, I think Beijing is definitely keeping an eye on the development of the AUKUS. And well, actually, let's not forget that the US and South Korea have the Mutual Defense Treaty, and the US and Japan has the Treaty of Mutual Cooperation and Security. And the joint military exercises between these three countries have been routinized over the past several years. However, I think for South Korea and Japan, joining AUKUS means that the multilateral defense framework will become stronger and more complete, and it can facilitate effective cooperation between these countries, and it can also facilitate a faster response to any crisis in the region. So in the trilateral summit of these three countries, South Korea, Japan, and China, they will definitely talk about this issue, but I think that this issue will not be the main issue on the discussion table, at least for China, because I think for China, the main concern right now is about the trade restrictions of the high-tech products due to the U.S. trade policy towards China. So in this summit, I think at least for China, it is possible that this country will seek further trade cooperation and talks for issues about importing high-tech products from the other two countries.
Mm-hmm. On the other hand, Japan and South Korea will want Beijing to exert its influence on the North Korean nuclear issue. So Professor Yuan, for North Korea, China is the largest trading partner. What benefits can Japan and South Korea offer to China compared with the China-North Korea trade relationship? How should China balance these multilateral relations?
I personally am very, very skeptical about any Chinese role that can be played over influence on the North Korea's posture. I think the time has already ended. North Korea has demonstrated it's a very, very independent posture of its own. So so probably we have to modify our description about Chinese relation on North Korea to be exact. Therefore, totally agree with the Professor Su's analysis on the current issue. It has to deal with about the most difficult issue. There's a trade embargo, there's protectionist and fragile of supply chain and economic and nature. I think that will attract a lot of attention during this coming summit.
Mm-hmm. Professor Su, you want to add up to this?
Yeah, well, I think let's see what will happen in the summit probably in 3 weeks or 2 weeks. And I think one of the potential issues that they will discuss is about whether they want to resume the talks about this long ongoing trade talks between of the China, Japan, and South Korea free trade agreement, the FTA, because that talk was stopped in 2019, when the trade dispute between South Korea and Japan occurred in that year, and after that, no talks have been held, of course, also partly due to the COVID-19 crisis. So probably so far, it is difficult to see that whether the trade between these three countries, between China and Japan and South Korea will change dramatically. But let's see whether they will have more talks and conversations about trade issues in the summit.
Could you say elaborate more about the trade, especially like deficits on the side of China or on the side of Japan or Korea? How can we understand this trade issue or disputes among the three countries?
Well, so first of all, let's go back to 2019 when the trade dispute between South Korea and Japan occurred, which was about this high-tech, the materials for producing high-tech chips, right? That Japan sort of make a very strict policies for importing these materials to South Korea, so that would influence the semiconductor industries in South Korea for at least like 3 years, from 2019 to mid 2023. So that's between these two countries. And after 2023, because the U.S. played a very important role to sort of soften the relationship between these two countries. So it seems that the situation has been getting better in the past year. And but regarding China and the trade relationship between China and the two countries, I think we cannot forget the impact of the COVID-19, which really had a very negative impact on the market and also the trade of China. So far, I think China is trying very hard to sort of regain this momentum to facilitate a better trade with these two countries and also with the world. But so far, it's growing, but it's still ongoing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I think that here is a thorny issue for this forthcoming summit to deal with. That is a U.S. imposition of the unilateral last year about its foreign product, direct foreign product rules over the semiconductor technology and also other installation. So the South Korea, Samsung complained about it. I think the Japanese chemical and also equipment company complained about, because the United States imposed restriction on this, dealing with the China export control. So I think China would very much like to exploit this dispute at this juncture to see whether they could do something to distance an American partner, namely South Korea and Japan, from the very, very strict dealing with China. So this would be one of the potential areas to be exploited by China.
I think that's a very good case of how the United States have difficulty in having a say in a trade bond between China, Japan, and China and South Korea. In April, the US, Japan, and the Philippines held a historic summit at the White House, which will be followed by a meeting between the US, Japan, and South Korea in Washington in July. Facing the east tension between both China and the US, how should Japan and South Korea adjust their relations with the communist China? And also, I also wonder that what's the primary task for Japan and South Korea? Is it, on the one hand, managing the threats from North Korea, or navigating through the China-US rivalry?
Yeah. Well, in terms of the Japan and South Korea's potential adjustments of their relationship with China, I think the two countries will largely follow the steps of the United States, which means that any change in the relationship between China and the two countries will not fundamentally undermine the two countries' current friendly relationship with the United States. So as we know that in August 2023, in a trilateral summit between the U.S., Japan, and South Korea in Camp David, these three countries in the joint statement calling China's behavior supporting its unlawful maritime claims in South China Sea as dangerous and aggressive. So basically, it's a pretty strong sort of accusation. So I think I don't think that these three countries will take a U-turn for this situation, for this position, just after 1 year. So that is my observation. And for your second question, I think that managing the threats from North Korea will be the primary task. Yeah, well, that's in my opinion. Like I said, if Japan and South Korea are able to join the AUKUS, it will be more effective to cope with any military crisis in the region.
Professor Yuan, so what is your observation of this?
I would disagree with the most of the observations so far. I think the treating North Korea as a real threat is no longer valid. You know,
for the United States or for Japan, Korea?
I do not believe that anyone is so eager to deal with the North Korea at this moment, because they all regard that North Korea has been stabilized of its posture. What matters the most is Camp David, reached some posture agreement that is the United States would offer North Korea, the South Korea and Japan the real-time sensitive monitoring data about any movement of North Korea. I think North Korea will be very, very cautious to act, not to disrupt. So at this moment, I think the North Korea will not disrupt the regional environment, stable situation. What matters the most is the China wishes to seek an alternative line of principle, that is to guide the international behavior vis-a-vis that of the United States. And yet, given the nature of the time honor U.S. Korea and the U.S. Japan military alliance, is no room for China to manipulate it. We'll see. But the gesture China is making is to taking advantage of this timing, all right, to reinstate its role, to outline its position. I think to reiterate it is a principle, no more or no less.
There will be certainly various focal points from different countries in the China, Japan, Korea's summits. But on which topic can China, Japan, Korea summit achieve tangible results? I know both of you more or less mentioned some of them. For example, the trade issue, maybe the technology issue, and what else? Could you kind of help us to exhaust, those kind of possible issues that they can have a consensus over? Professor?
Yeah. Well, another possible issue is, of course, the historical sort of sovereign disputes between different countries, but that is pretty difficult to deal with. So I think that they would rather leave these highly disputable issues aside and focus on something that can be come with a sort of tangible achievements. So one thing that I believe, which is highly likely to achieve more than other issues is about trade, I think, because as I said, like after 2023, the trade disputes between Japan and South Korea has been sort of settled since then. So basically, I think for then, it's time to go ahead. Yeah. So in this summit, I think they will probably talk much more about the trade issues and cooperations and how to sort of deepen the trade relationship between the three countries, and also probably how to like establish or having more talks about how to make the FTA between these three countries and how to use that FTA to incorporate with RCEP.
The situation in East Asia is tense, with ongoing crises in the Taiwan Strait, continuous conflicts in South China Sea, and a standoff on the Korean Peninsula. So some South Korean scholars believe that compared to the Taiwan Strait separating the two sides of the Taiwan conflict, North and South Korea are only separated by a roughly 140-kilometer border, making it less difficult for North Korea to cross the demilitarized zone, DMZ, coupled with ongoing military exercises on both sides of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's aggressive policies. They argue that the Korean Peninsula is more likely to be the first to face a crisis. So do you buy into this kind of analysis?
Well, I think that this analysis is a little bit like too much, I think, because so far I think it is very hard to tell which conflict will come first. So for example, logically, it all depends on to what extent that the invader think about the outcome of the war. So if the invader, let's talk about like Kim Jong-un, if he thinks that winning the war is the most important goal, I think he will never invade or initiate the conflicts in Korean Peninsula. But if his goal is something else, he can use whatever reason to initiate the conflict. So so I think that and in terms of the potential conflicts in Taiwan Straits, it's even more complicated because China has different concerns, and the United States does not have a treaty like defense treaty with Taiwan. So the situation here in Taiwan Straits is much more complicated. It's less predictable.
I have a different question for Professor Yuan. Is that South Korea's media analyzed that if China were to attack Taiwan, it might open a second front on the Korean Peninsula to involve South Korea in the Taiwan war and diverts the attention of the U.S. military. So what are your thoughts on the link between the two possible conflicts?
Well, the coupling two wars together is at one time could only happen in theory. I think the situation of Korean Peninsula differ that drastically from cross relations, whereas the Korea Peninsula cases exemplify two-state conflict, DPRK and ROK, under the Constitution of of the United Nations. So the international ramifications will be very, very different from the cross-strait relations. So the making comparison about this two scenario would be only serve as a theoretical exercise, and yet I think I would argue that more likely that it would be more likely to have a cross-strait confrontation than the two Korea confrontation nowadays. So Taiwan Straits would yield a more explicit episode vis-a-vis that of two Korea, simply because DPRK demonstrated in the past 10 years, relative stable and relative rational, and also I think instead of a cross-strait war, I think Ukraine Russia war offers something for North Korea to exploit than the cross-strait relations.
Okay. The last question for both of you, just I request a brief response, is that if Donald Trump is elected as the next president of the United States, tell us a little bit about your prediction about how he's going to impact on the East Asia. Will the situation in the East Asia become more dangerous, or you think that it become calmer, or anything else, Professor?
Well, first of all, I think the main key player is that can make the region more dangerous or peaceful is not United States, it is China. So that is the first thing. The second thing is that if Donald Trump were elected, I think so far it is likely that he will still follow the previous like One China policy, and also the existing treaties between China and and the United States, and also some on the Taiwan Relationship Act. I don't think that will not change dramatically. So probably he will use very strong rhetoric or very dramatic rhetoric to sort of frame the relationship between U.S. and China. But I think nothing will change in nature.
Professor Yuan?
I think the South Korea is very worried about the Donald Trump's presidency. Is very likely Japan's demonstrate its anxiety. I think everybody is anxious about the likelihood should Donald Trump get reelected. I think Donald Trump has demonstrated one thing: he's unpredictable. Therefore, he might offset all the existing arrangement to change all the practice. When it comes to Taiwan-China relation, it's very likely that somehow he would negotiate it with China as how to deal with Taiwan issue. So unpredictability.
All right, Professor Yuan, Professor Su, thank you for the insights and participation in the show. Like our show, subscribe to Taiwan Talks. See you soon.